History, as it's commonly told, is a grand and brutal epic. It's a story of swords and sieges, of empires rising and falling on the strength of their armies and the brilliance of their generals. We remember the conquerors, the Alexanders, the Caesars, the Genghis Khans. We study the battles that decided the fate of nations and memorize the borders drawn and redrawn in blood. This is the history of division, of power asserted through force. But what if the most powerful and enduring force that shaped our world wasn't a legion or a horde, but a single anonymous merchant with a cart full of goods? What if the greatest empires weren't built on the foundation of conquest, but on the quiet, persistent demand for commodities? For a moment, let's set aside the dramatic narratives of gold rushes, territorial conquest, and military might. The real story, the one that has been quietly and inexorably forging our modern world for millennia, was built on far more humble things. The tang of salt on the tongue, the shimmer of silk on the skin, and the fragrant aroma of spices in the air. These were not the spoils of war, but the currency of connection. They were goods so desirable that they compelled humanity to undertake immense risks, not to destroy, but to exchange. This is the story of a different kind of power, the power of the marketplace to bridge divides, to foster innovation, and to weave the disparate threads of human culture into a single, intricate tapestry. This is the Via Salaria, the Salt Road, one of ancient Rome's most vital arteries. Its weathered stones tell a story that is far older than the Colosseum. It wasn't primarily built for legions marching to glorious battle, their standards held high. It was engineered for something so fundamental, so intrinsically valuable to human life, that Roman soldiers received a salarium, an allowance for purchasing salt, though it wasn't typically paid directly in salt itself. This road, and countless others like it, represents a different kind of history, a history of connection, not conflict, of creation, not destruction. It is here that our story begins. It is the story of how humble goods, carried with painstaking effort across treacherous, sun-scorched deserts and over the unpredictable, storm-tossed seas, connected the globe in ways that armies never could. These journeys, undertaken for profit, inadvertently created unimaginable wealth, built magnificent cities in the middle of nowhere, and, most importantly, became the conduits for ideas, technologies, and beliefs that would quietly and permanently change the course of civilization. This is the story of the trade routes that built our world, proving that the desire to connect and exchange is one of history's most powerful and creative forces, one that can build empires without firing a single shot. Before silk dazzled Roman emperors, before spices launched 1,000 ships on perilous voyages, humanity's first great international currency was something we now take completely for granted: salt. For millennia, this simple crystalline mineral was nothing less than the engine of civilization. It wasn't a luxury, it was life itself. In a world before refrigeration, salt was the difference between survival and starvation. It was the only reliable method for preserving meat and fish, allowing societies to store food through harsh winters and enabling armies and travelers to venture farther from their agricultural heartlands than ever before. Its importance didn't stop there. Salt was essential for human and animal health, replenishing vital electrolytes lost through sweat. It served as a powerful antiseptic for treating wounds, a key chemical agent in industries like tanning leather, and held deep significance in religious rituals as a symbol of purity and preservation. Nowhere was the raw power of salt more starkly demonstrated than in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Sahara Desert. While its roots go back further into antiquity, a complex and resilient network of trade routes truly began to flourish around the 8th century CE, stitching the Mediterranean shores of North Africa to the vibrant, flourishing kingdoms of West Africa. This was the legendary Trans-Saharan trade. From the north, Berber traders, the undisputed masters of the desert, whose knowledge of the stars and subtle landmarks was a life-saving skill, guided enormous camel caravans southward on journeys that could last for months. Their primary cargo was salt, mined from desolate, sun-blasted salt flats like Tagaza in present-day Mali, a place so barren that the houses were built from the very salt slabs they mined. Here, laborers toiled under a brutal sun, cutting the earth into heavy rectangular plates, each a unit of immense value. To the south, below the great ocean of sand, lay the kingdoms of the Sahel, a region bursting with a different, more glamorous kind of wealth: gold. The mines of the Bambouk and Bure regions produced vast quantities of the precious metal that was in high demand across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Europe to mint coins and adorn the powerful. Yet in this gold-rich land, salt was the scarcer, more critical commodity desperately needed for diet and food preservation in the hot, humid climate. And this is where it gets crazy. This profound geographical imbalance created one of the most famous and lucrative exchanges in history: salt for gold. In legendary trading hubs like Timbuktu and Djenné, it was said that salt from the north could, at times, be traded for its equal weight in gold. Imagine the scene. On one side of the scales, the gleaming heavy metal that symbolized ultimate luxury. On the other, the coarse, crystalline mineral that preserved life itself. This incredibly lucrative trade didn't just enrich a few merchants, it built empires. The first great beneficiary was the Kingdom of Ghana. By strategically controlling the key trade routes, the kings of Ghana didn't need to mine the gold themselves. They simply taxed its movement. This revenue allowed them to build a powerful state and establish a level of wealth that stunned early Arab chroniclers. When Ghana's influence eventually faded, the Mali Empire rose in the 13th century to take its place, achieving even greater heights of power and prestige. But here's the twist. The wealth of Mali under its most famous ruler, Mansa Musa, became so immense that his actions would literally change the value of gold on the other side of the world. His pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 is perhaps the single greatest testament to the power of this trade. According to contemporary accounts, his caravan was a moving city of tens of thousands, with camels loaded with hundreds of pounds of gold dust. As he traveled, he distributed his wealth with such astounding generosity, particularly in Cairo, that he single-handedly flooded the market and depressed the local price of gold for over a decade. This was not the wealth of plunder, it was the wealth of commerce. But it wasn't just goods that moved across the sands. The caravans were living conduits of culture. Berber traders brought with them the religion of Islam, which spread peacefully along the trade routes. Timbuktu evolved from a simple trading post into a world-renowned center of Islamic scholarship, attracting poets, scientists, and astronomers. The great empires of Ghana, Mali, and later Songhai were built by strategically positioning themselves as the indispensable bridge between those who had salt and those who had gold. They proved that control over the arteries of commerce could be just as powerful, if not more so, than sheer military force. Long before Rome was a republic, even before the legendary heroes of the Trojan War, another precious substance was tracing a luminous path across prehistoric Europe. It wasn't a metal forged in fire, but a fossilized tree resin, strangely warm to the touch and shrouded in myth, amber. Dubbed Northern Gold, this organic gem, which washed up on the cold shores of the Baltic and North Seas, sparked one of the world's most ancient long-distance trade networks, the Amber Road. Active as far back as 3000 BCE, this route predates even the famous Silk Road. The primary source was the Baltic Sea coastline. For the Neolithic and Bronze Age peoples of the north, it was an abundant local resource. But for the rising civilizations of the Mediterranean, it was a substance of immense mystery and desire. The Greeks called it electron, the origin of our word for electricity, because of the static charge it produced when rubbed, a seemingly magical property. The Romans, too, were enchanted, weaving a tragic myth for its origin. They believed amber was the solidified golden tears of the sun god's daughters, weeping for their brother Phaethon, who was struck down by Zeus. This mystique made it an incredibly valuable luxury. The journey of this northern gold was an epic undertaking. The Amber Road wasn't a single highway, but a web of riverways and overland tracks. From the Baltic coast, traders would journey south along rivers like the Vistula and the Elbe, navigate through dense forests, negotiate with countless different tribes, and eventually cross the formidable Alps before descending into Italy. Here, Roman cities like Aquileia became major hubs for processing and trading the raw amber, which was then shipped throughout the Roman Empire and beyond, reaching as far as Egypt and Persia. What happened next shocked even historians. The evidence for this vast, ancient network, revealed by archaeologists, turned up in the most hallowed places of the ancient world. Baltic amber has been found in Bronze Age sites across the Mediterranean, dating back over 3,300 years. It was discovered in the royal shaft graves of Mycenae in Greece, the city of the legendary King Agamemnon, dating back to the 16th century BCE. Each of these tiny, honey-colored beads is a silent testament to an immense journey of thousands of miles, proving that even in deep antiquity, the desire for beauty could bridge enormous cultural and geographical distances. But this was never a one-way street. In exchange for the precious resin, coveted goods from the Mediterranean flowed northward: Roman glass beads, fine pottery, bronze vessels, and wine. It was a powerful conduit for culture and technology. Artistic styles, metalworking techniques, and decorative motifs traveled the route in both directions, creating a shared cultural vocabulary. The Amber Road stands as a profound example of how a single luxury item can weave together an entire continent. It didn't require legions or emperors to connect the shores of the Baltic to the sands of Egypt. It just required a shared human desire for a beautiful, mysterious substance. Of all the great ancient trade networks, none captures the human imagination quite like the Silk Road. It is a legend, a grand narrative that evokes romantic images of vast camel caravans marching against a backdrop of endless desert dunes. And while in reality it was never a single road but a complex and ever-shifting network of paths, its impact was every bit as profound as the legend suggests. For well over a millennium, the Silk Road was the primary circulatory system for the Eastern Hemisphere, the main channel through which not only goods but ideas, religions, technologies, and even diseases flowed between the great civilizations of China, India, Persia, and Rome. So where did this world-changing network begin? We can trace its official genesis back to China's Han Dynasty in the 2nd century BCE. The Emperor Wu sent an envoy named Zhang Qian to the west, not for trade but to find allies against the nomadic Xiongnu tribes. Zhang Qian's mission was a diplomatic failure. He was captured and held prisoner for over a decade. But the intelligence he brought back was revolutionary. He spoke of powerful kingdoms to the west, of magnificent heavenly horses, and of a world eager for Chinese goods. This knowledge sparked China's westward ambition, and the primary commodity they possessed was a secret they guarded with unparalleled ferocity: silk. For the rest of the world, silk was pure magic. It was impossibly soft, lightweight, and strong. When it first appeared in Rome around the 1st century BCE, it caused a cultural and economic sensation. But here's the mind-blowing part. The Romans became so obsessed that it nearly bankrupted their treasury and caused a full-blown moral panic. The historian Pliny the Elder complained that fortunes in gold and silver flowed eastward to pay for this decadent luxury. Moralists like Seneca the Elder raged against silk, claiming its sheerness was indecent and led to moral decay. The Senate even passed laws attempting to ban men from wearing it, deeming it effeminate. Yet the demand was unstoppable. For all their fascination, the Romans had no idea where it came from. The truth, the painstaking process of cultivating silkworms, was China's most valuable state secret, and revealing it was an offense punishable by death. The journey a bolt of silk undertook was one of the most arduous on the planet, stretching over 4,000 miles from the Han capital of Chang'an. It wound past the Great Wall, split to avoid the brutal Taklamakan Desert, whose name means "he who enters does not come out," and climbed over the oxygen-starved heights of the Pamir Mountains. Very few merchants traveled the entire length. Instead, it operated like a massive relay race. Chinese traders sold silk to Central Asian middlemen, like the Sogdians, who transported it to Persian merchants, who in turn carried it to the Mediterranean. At each stage, the price skyrocketed. Along these perilous routes, a unique infrastructure emerged. Oases grew into magnificent multicultural cities: Samarkand, Bukhara, Kashgar. To protect the caravans, a network of roadside inns called caravanserais was built. Fortified compounds set a day's journey apart where merchants could find safety, food, and lodging. But of course, it wasn't just silk that traveled these paths. From the west came gold, silver, and Roman glass. From Central Asia came powerful horses. From India came spices and cotton. And from China, besides silk, came a host of world-changing inventions, chief among them paper. which slowly made its way west, and later played a crucial role in fueling the Renaissance and the printing revolution. Even more transformative were the ideas that hitched a ride. The Silk Road was the greatest engine for cultural diffusion in the ancient world. It was along these dusty trails that Buddhism spread from India to China. Later, Nestorian Christianity and Manichaeism moved eastward, while Islam moved westward. The Silk Road was a network built for profit, but its greatest legacy was the creation of a shared Eurasian civilization, demonstrating that commerce is history's greatest conversationalist. While camel caravans were braving the deserts of Asia, another commercial revolution was happening on the high seas. This was the world of the spice routes, a vast maritime network that connected Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and Europe. Think of it as a maritime Silk Road, but its highways were the open waters of the Indian Ocean, all made possible by mastering the predictable monsoon winds. And for thousands of years, the engine of this enormous global exchange was the insatiable demand for spices. The sources of the most prized spices were, for centuries, among the most closely guarded secrets in the world. Cloves, nutmeg, and mace grew naturally only on a handful of tiny volcanic islands in Indonesia, the legendary Spice Islands. Black pepper, the king of spices, came from India's Malabar coast. To the Romans and later the medieval Europeans, their origins were a complete mystery. And this is where the story gets wild. Arab traders, who for centuries acted as the primary middlemen, protected their monopoly by spinning fantastic and terrifying tales. They told stories of cinnamon being collected from the nests of giant, ferocious birds, and of pepper groves guarded by fiery, venomous serpents that had to be driven away by setting the forests ablaze, which they claimed was what turned the peppercorns black. But why were these dried seeds and bark so valuable, often worth more than their weight in gold? In an era before modern medicine, they were seen as powerful cure-alls. They were also brilliant culinary agents that made the monotonous European diet far more exciting. But above all, they were the ultimate status symbol. To sprinkle pepper on a dish at a banquet was a clear sign that you were wealthy enough to afford the rarest products from the farthest corners of the known earth. The genius of this entire maritime system was the monsoon. These seasonal winds blew with clockwork reliability from the southwest in the summer and from the northeast in the winter, allowing for a safe and predictable round-trip journey. Arab, Indian, and Persian sailors mastered these patterns thousands of years ago, turning the ocean into a highway with their triangular-sailed dhows. For centuries, the spice trade flowed through a long chain of intermediaries. Spice growers on the Banda Islands would sell to local traders, who sailed to major ports like Malacca. From there, spices were taken to India, where they were met by Arab dhows. The cargo crossed the Arabian Sea, began a grueling overland journey by camel, and finally arrived in Mediterranean ports like Alexandria. There, merchants from Venice and Genoa would purchase the spices and distribute them throughout Europe at an enormous markup. This Venetian monopoly generated immense wealth, but it also created deep frustration among Europe's other rising powers, like Portugal and Spain. It was this desire to break the Venetian Muslim stranglehold and find a direct sea route to the Spice Islands that became the primary driver for the Age of Discovery. Christopher Columbus sailed west hoping to find a back door to the Indies and its fabled spices. Instead, it was the determined Portuguese who finally found the way. In 1498, after a harrowing voyage, the explorer Vasco da Gama successfully rounded Africa's Cape of Good Hope and made landfall in Calicut, India. For the first time, a European power had established a direct maritime link to the spice markets of the East. The voyage was world-changing. It completely bypassed the old overland routes and the entire network of Arab and Venetian middlemen, fundamentally and permanently shifting the balance of global economic power from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. Like the land routes, these sea lanes were also powerful conduits for culture and religion, turning the world's oceans from barriers into bridges and creating the world's first truly global economy. In 1492, history took a sudden, dramatic, and irreversible right turn. When Christopher Columbus and his crew made landfall in the Americas, they inadvertently kicked off a vast, intercontinental transfer of plants, animals, technologies, diseases, and ideas that would irrevocably reshape the entire planet. This process, known as the Columbian Exchange, was the most dramatic and consequential trade route of all, an unplanned and permanent redrawing of the planet's ecological, agricultural, and demographic map. Before 1492, the Old World, Europe, Asia, Africa, and the New World, the Americas, were two separate biological realms. Having evolved in complete isolation for tens of millions of years, the Columbian Exchange shattered that separation in an instant. First, the flow of life from the Old World to the New. Europeans brought animals completely alien to the Americas: horses, cattle, pigs, and sheep. The horse proved revolutionary, transforming the lives of many Native American groups like the Plains Indians, who became master equestrians, able to hunt and travel over vast territories. Europeans also brought their staple crops: wheat, rice, sugarcane, and coffee. These would lead to the rise of massive plantation economies. But this agricultural revolution came at an unthinkable human cost, as it was built upon and fueled the transatlantic slave trade. But what Europeans brought with them unintentionally was a biological time bomb. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza were invisible killers. Native populations, having never been exposed, had no immunity, and the results were nothing short of apocalyptic, with epidemics wiping out an estimated 90% of the indigenous population in some regions. But the exchange flowed powerfully in both directions, and the impact on the Old World was just as revolutionary, particularly when it came to food. It is nearly impossible to imagine world cuisine without the contributions of the Americas. Think of Italian food without the tomato, Irish food without the potato, or Thai food without the chili pepper. Before 1492, none of these existed anywhere outside of the Americas. The humble potato, more than any other crop, had the single greatest impact on Europe. It was a caloric powerhouse that could grow in poor soils and cold climates. Its adoption across northern Europe led to a massive population boom in the 18th and 19th centuries, significantly reducing famines. It is estimated that the introduction of the potato was responsible for as much as a quarter of all population growth in Europe between 1700 and 1900. Maize, or corn, had a similarly transformative effect across Africa and parts of Asia. Other New World crops like sweet potatoes, cassava, peanuts, and cacao became essential foodstuffs around the globe, helping to fuel a global population explosion. The Columbian Exchange wasn't a planned route like the Silk Road. It was the chaotic, often brutal result of two long-separated worlds colliding. Yet in its wake, it created the very foundations of our modern, globalized system. It connected every continent except Antarctica in a new and permanent web of biological and cultural exchange. It utterly transformed diets, landscapes, and economies across the planet, proving that the most world-changing connections are sometimes the ones we never intended to make. These ancient and powerful networks of exchange show that for millennia, humanity has been driven by a deep and profound desire to connect, to trade, and to share. The goods themselves have certainly changed, from salt, silk, and spices to the microchips, crude oil, and digital data that circle the globe in fractions of a second today. But that fundamental human impulse remains exactly the same. So, which of these ancient goods do you think has had the biggest and most lasting impact on your own daily life? Is it the spices in your kitchen cabinet, the material of your clothes, or the crops that make up your favorite meals? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. From the salt-laden caravans of the Sahara to the spice-filled ships navigating the Indian Ocean, and from the amber beads of the Baltic to the silken threads of China, we've uncovered a different story of civilization. It's a history written not by generals, but by merchants, artisans, and sailors. It was shaped not with the sharp edge of the sword, but with the persistent value of commodities. These great trade routes were far more than just commercial highways for profit. They were the living arteries of a nascent global network, pumping not just goods, but lifeblood in the form of culture, technology, and ideas. Through them, humanity exchanged far more than just merchandise. We traded knowledge, art, and faith. Buddhism traveled with bolts of silk. Islam with slabs of salt, and new farming techniques with humble potatoes and cobs of corn. Great cities like Samarkand, Timbuktu, and Venice rose not primarily as military outposts, but as cosmopolitan hubs of commerce and learning where people from different worlds met peacefully to transact business. This quiet, alternative history of trade reveals a powerful truth. While conflict and war often dominate our collective memory, it is connection that has consistently been the most transformative and creative force. The simple, shared desire for a new flavor, a finer fabric, or a beautiful ornament has, time and time again, pushed humanity to cross scorching deserts, scale impassable mountains, and sail across unknown oceans. In doing so, we did more than just trade products. We traded parts of ourselves, slowly and painstakingly weaving together the disparate cultures of our planet into the single, deeply interconnected civilization we inhabit today. The echoes of these ancient routes are all around us, embedded in the food we eat, the clothes we wear, and the ideas we share. A world built in large and crucial part without wars.